And so welcome everyone to this monthly live Deep Transformation Network event. And just by way of context, we all are only too feeling it like so strongly how this new authoritarian regime here in the US, where I am, is just wreaking havoc with people's lives all around the world. And when this happens, it's very easy for each of us to feel fragmented and isolated. And of course, like this terrible sense of dread. Um, and in these times, there's really never been a more crucial moment, I think, in all of our lives, for us to remember the power of core human values of solidarity and care and allow ourselves to feel empowered by community. So it seemed kind of perfect to me that um, this month we're able to welcome to the DTN three really leading lights shining the way forward with through community from Shareable, which is a key global resource really for collaboration. And over the years, they've developed the largest collection of online how-to guides for community building and solidarity. And they're a central storytelling and action hub. They reach millions of people from around the world. And joining us today are Shareable's executive director, Tom Llewellyn, also Hajar Tazi, who's a Shareable board member, and she's also director of ecosystem weaving and strategic initiatives at the Synergia Institute, among many other things, which we'll talk about today. And Neal Gorenflo, who's co-founder and board president of Shareable, and he also led Shareable from 2009 to 2022 as executive director. So, um, big welcome to all three of you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Just what an opportunity to get the chance to ask you questions about things that have been so meaningful to me for so long. And just to say before we start this conversation, I've been really personally inspired and deeply informed by Shareable's work over the years. I think some of you know I've been working for a few years now on a book on this vision of eco-civilization, which is going to be called Reclaim Our Future, How We Can Make a World That Works for All. I hope to be completing the manuscript later this year, get it published early next year. But Shareable's publications have been foundational for me. And one in particular, hopefully I'll touch on, is they have a Sharing Cities reference guide for activating the urban commons. And they've done groundbreaking research, things like platform cooperatives that can lead to a true sharing economy. Just such great opportunities that they make available. So hopefully we'll get to cover some of these today. But if I could, Neal, I'd like to start off just by turning to you because you
Sure. Yeah.
were
And thanks for the intro, generous intro, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. That's so nice.
oh, yeah, you're welcome. I mean, really, this is just it just feels exciting to me that we have this chance to talk. Um, really, I'm a fan. So, um, and you started or Shareable, or like you were an original co-founder,
Yes.
and this is some years back, right? So, I'm just kind of curious a little bit when I read a little bit about your history. It looks like you had an arc that was somewhat parallel to my own arc of my life, where I was in business. In my case, I actually started a company and took it public, and everything crashed, and I kind of went through a whole meltdown to really redirect my entire path of my life for the last, I don't know, almost 15 to 20 years now. But maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your own path, how that led you to this inspiration to want to like found Shareable and how that happened.
Yeah, and I kind of want to tie this to your introduction too, that in this moment of rising authoritarianism, the gathering together is a revolutionary act.
Mhm.
And the arc of my story is kind of going from living life as an individual, guided by individualism, maybe unconsciously, not by choice, and sometimes by necessity because of my childhood. But then realizing that I really, to become a whole person, I needed to do something a little bit different. And then with Shareable, similar to what you were saying, I had a business career, right? And there was there was three things that kind of led me to start Shareable. First, there was this intellectual foundation. This is around 2003. I'm living in San Francisco. The sustainability wave is kind of cresting. There's a small group of us that were, excited about this, but saw something lacking. We didn't want the same consumerist, society just made green. We wanted social transformation along with the technological. And that's kind of the milieu where I started investigating sharing as a path for deep transformation.
Hmm.
And then, the second thing was the intellectual wasn't enough to get me to act really.
Hmm.
But I got the motivation in 2004 and a moment of satori and a business trip of all things, right? And that's where I realized, well, in this moment of deep reflection, that was kind of spontaneous, that living life as a solo performance was unfulfilling, but actually counterproductive. That I could not become a whole person on my own. That was just not possible. I, kind of saw something simple there for the first time, and also saw that other people suffered similarly. I felt that, and also that they suffered, far worse than you know
Yeah.
than what I was, my condition, which is like a kind of pampered office worker, right? Um, and I didn't really see this as a unique insight. I just felt it really deeply, and I quit my job right after that, and vowed to try to create a life where community and sharing is central, and help others do the same thing.
Mm.
And the pain that I felt, this former life, that mostly existential and psychological, right? So intense that I felt a kind of moral obligation to help others avoid suffering. So, anyways, I got the motivation, and then I got lucky and met the right people, and met Laura Schechter at the Shift Foundation, and Tom and others joined, and there's so many other people to thank
Mm. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
making that
What
happen.
a,
Anyways,
that's a great story, Neil. I so resonate. I love that phrase. I saw Sylvia put it in the chat. Living life as a solo performance. That really captures yeah, what so many of us have had to experience and before that transformation. And also I'm kind of curious. So you founded Charitable, but then this is like something like 20 years now that this has been going on. How have you seen it evolve or change in this time? What's been the big transformations or shifts?
yeah. So my path, started in 2003. Shareable was started in 2009,
Mhm.
and so we're like going on 16 years.
Yeah.
That'll be 16 years in September. And at first, we're just this new nonprofit. No one knows us. We're struggling to establish ourselves. Sharing is not even on the radar. Like, we're just these weirdos talking about sharing. We can't even hire writers, and pay them. Like, they won't take our money to write on our platform, right? And there is a small group that did kind of get us, but just for most people, it just didn't even register. And then something started to happen in San Francisco. We covered sharing as this broad movement, where there were solidarity economy and things happening in neighborhoods like time banks and tool libraries. We wanted to connect the dots and show that sharing was like integral part of our lives if we chose to recognize it. And this is what we were trying to do. And one of these things that we were also seeing is the use of technology, of networks, to create what became known as the sharing economy. We were the first on the scene, started writing about this. It never was our number one thing. We were always having other things, but it's the thing that blew up. And at first, it was very, these are tiny companies, had no money. I honestly didn't think they had any chance or little chance of going anywhere. But the VC money flowed in, and these small companies that many of them had, genuine communitarian aims. This changed quickly, and it became the sharing economy, and
Hmm.
very extractive. And then, the next stage was we were among the first to start criticizing the sharing economy and then launch
Hmm.
these kind of counter movements, platform cooperatives and sharing cities, and
Yeah.
became the catalyst and support for those movements, which became global, and, important in their own right. So, and now we're into a new era. Instead of, we did a lot of storytelling, we've got this
Right.
huge archive, and now we're doing more helping people do stuff on the ground. We did that in the
Mm.
past. We balanced it with our editorial, but now we're going more and more in that direction.
Yeah.
Tom's going to talk about all that.
That's great. Yeah, exactly. We'll talk with Tom about that in a moment. But before I turn to Hajar, I want to turn to you next. But I did want to just explore this one thing with you, Neil, as you were saying about this kind of thrust of technology and how even the very word sharing economy got taken over. And we've seen that with so many of the best words, like they get taken over by the sort of capitalist suction machine and then used in the complete opposite way to what it is, because of course the information is not being shared but sucked into this centralized routine. And I'm kind of what I see in so much of the stuff that you've been helping to show is where the almost like the structure itself is around the sharing, right? Where the information is shared, where it's almost structurally designed so it can't be centralized or whatever. And I'm just kind of curious because you've written so much about things like sharing cities and platform cooperatives. What you see is the core essential feature that allows things to stay in the true sharing, true solidarity economy, rather than getting sucked into the capitalist machine.
Yeah, it has to be tied to the governance and the ownership,
Yeah.
and the way it's funded.
Mhm.
Otherwise, even though a company may
Yeah.
talk a good game about being a social enterprise, if they're funded by, if they're profit driven and funded by VCs, then it's going to devolve into a pure profit making,
Mhm.
get the returns to investors type of proposal or proposition. So,
Yeah.
and we see that happen over and over and over again, uh, since the start of the internet. And, it's probably happened before that as well. But,
Yeah.
some of our favorite platforms, and everyone's excited and there's this community feeling, but the underlying governance and ownership structure is, centralized governance and you know, funded by VCs, and they
Yeah.
have they have to meet their demands of their investors, and that's
Right.
becomes the priority, not the users or the community.
Yeah, I love that, Neil. And yeah, I completely align with you on that. That's you from the outset, you have to like start off saying, okay, we're going to do this together as a community and go from there and structure everything around
And
that.
have like the right legal format and
Yes.
investment, fundraising vehicle, etc. Right.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. Yeah, thanks for that. That is great. I think that's so important. But I'd like to turn to you, Hajar. Um, and Hajar, you and I have now, we've gotten to know each other really quite well in last year. We're working together on an initiative around eco-civilization. Um, and I'd love to ask you, it's like one of the things that always amazes me when I look at everything about you on the web is how many of the best networks and entities and organizations you're not just connected with, but in a real leadership role with. And I'm just kind of curious how you got originally connected with Shareable and what Shareable meant to you when you first came across it.
Yeah, thank you for this question, Jeremy. Well, funny enough, I got connected with Shareable through a mutual aid tool
Oh,
as part of the offers and needs market, which was developed by the Post-Growth Institute to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, skills, resources, and passions. And I found a post by our wonderful operations director, Allison,
mm,
announcing a board member position within Shareable. And at the time, I had been very closely following the work of this organization. And I was looking for other ways besides my service as a board member at the PGI to support and amplify the solidarity economy movement. And so I reached out to express my interest and got connected with Tom. And we discussed the evolution of Shareable and its many programs. So both the storytelling and the organizing thread of the work of Shareable. And I instantly felt a very deep alignment and a very deep embodiment of the values of solidarity and mutual care. So it really felt like home from the very beginning.
I totally get that. That makes so much sense. And you know, sometimes I think of this movement for transformative change really a little bit like an ecosystem, in the sense that it's not like one right answer, or there's not one thing that is going to make it happen, but it's everything working together. And because I feel you're in quite a unique or a very rare position of really seeing different organizations and entities working together. I'm kind of curious if you could just riff off of that um, metaphor a little bit, and just kind of, if we think of this an ecosystem, how does Shareable fit in within the ecosystem? Where does it contribute, and where do other elements contribute to Shareable in a sort of mutual synergy kind of way?
Yeah, very great question. Thank you, Jeremy. I think you and probably the rest of your network and community are already familiar with the framework of transformation catalysts. We're able to connect, cohere, and amplify efforts to build alternatives to the dominant life-denying systems that we're a part of. And so I really see Shareable as a transformation catalyst. So as a news and action hub, the organization disseminates knowledge through toolkits, guides, resources, some of them that you've already mentioned, and then also hosts collabs for the exchange of knowledge, for co-learning, and for collaboration. And then, you know, the storytelling thread is also very essential because it opens up possibilities in our eco-social imaginaries and shows that other ways of relating to each other and of living together are possible. So Shareable really is this connector, this bridge builder who brings together actors and even movements who are working in silos and kind of creates this shared language and also cohering efforts on the ground. And it's playing a really essential role in this systems transformation ecosystem by, you know, connecting these actors and amplifying stories, real-world examples of communities who are embodying these shifts already on the ground.
Love to hear that, Hajar. Thanks. And so some of those words you mentioned, like that notion of connecting with others and amplifying, it feels so resonant with this notion of none of us alone as individuals, but in that solo performance, Neal was saying, or even as entities ourselves, are going to do it alone. But it's through that amplifying with the others that the whole network for change can almost become self-reinforcing. And you did mention this key phrase, to me, I think is key, is this transformation catalyst. And thank you, Sandra Waddock, for sharing in the chat. I see this really profound book that Sandra has written, really exploring what that actually means. And actually, just to say, our vision in the Deep Transformation Network, our stated vision, uses that phrase with a nod to Sandra's work for sort of a really, really profound way of thinking about things. And I totally get this is what Shareable is about. And then just to kind of go for a little bit to like a deeper layer, like something that is a key theme for many people here on the Deep Transformation Network is this recognition that deep transformation is not just about transforming our social systems or transforming what's sort of almost like above ground, but it's this almost like the deeper mycelial transformation within ourselves. And I know that you have done a lot of really deep research on really just on the theme of eco-spirituality. Um, and one of the things I'd love to hear you maybe talk a little bit about, I know you studied like Eastern spirituality and specifically Sufi mysticism, and maybe you can sort of connect that for us, how those deeper layers of really, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me, I sort of put it as kind of seeing a sense of being connected with something so much larger or part of so much larger, not even connected, but actually our very identity as being part of that. How does this connect with the work of Shareable, and how do these things all relate?
Yeah, thank you again, Jeremy, for another beautiful question. Well, I think first of all, it's this recognition that sharing is not solely a human practice, but that
Mm,
it is a principle and a natural law of life itself. You mentioned the mycelial network. Well, trees exchange nutrients through these networks as the rivers also nourish the land and the earth just offers its abundance freely. And so really we're all relational beings
mm,
sustained by these symbiotic relationships that make up the web of life and that
mm,
ensure not only individual flourishing, but also the flourishing of the whole that we're a part of. So as Thich Nhat Hanh mentions it, we to be is to interbe, to be woven into this web of life and into these symbiotic relationships. And in many indigenous and spiritual traditions, giving and receiving are recognized as a sacred act of reciprocity that acknowledge our interdependence and our interbeingness with the more than human world. And so,
mm,
as a Sufi mystic and also as a lifelong student of Eastern spiritualities, including Taoism, I have come to see love and devotion as sort of primary economic forces and
mm,
as the currencies of life itself. Or to use, the metaphor of the invisible hand as the invisible hands that sustain and nourish life. And
mm,
also in Taoism, we have these notions of, wu wei and effortless flow that reminds us that it is not by hoarding that we align with the flow of life, but it is by sharing and gifting to
mm,
others. And so I really see these ancestral wisdoms as being really key in reminding us that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we gift and share with each other.
mm. Yes, I so resonate. Thank you, Hajar, for speaking to that so clearly. And there was a poem you just wrote I saw recently, and you put on the web, where you ask, "What does radical love mean to you?" And it feels to me like you were just answering that. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but that's just that was feeling so alive in me as you asked that question. You spoke those things.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. It's been a really an interesting journey for me to reclaim this part of myself as being equal to sort of the cognitive and the rational,
Hmm.
the ability to love and to nurture. And this is what I find extremely valuable in Shareable and other organizations, this recentering of love and togetherness as key to sustaining our communities and economies.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ajahn. Let me turn to you, Tom. And Tom, as I mentioned before, is currently the ED, the executive director of Shareable. But I want to talk with you about that, Tom. But before I do, I want to kind of talk this concept we are just getting into of radical love and what that actually means in its reality. And I know that you spent a lot of time putting a film and a whole project and podcast together called The Response, basically about what happens, how communities respond to disaster, which in a way it's almost like that's the moments, those are these catastrophic moments when that kind of radical love can arise. And there was this book I'm sure you know very well by Rebecca Solnit called A Paradise Built in Hell, which kind of captured that feeling. But I'd love you to maybe just talk about that a little bit, about how you see radical love, or however we might call it, but playing a role in those moments when people are feeling most fragmented, obviously something that will become even more of a serious issue from many as this authoritarian regime like disrupts and just kicks around all the different structures of solidarity we have in our society.
Yeah, and thanks for having us on here and providing the opportunity to come and share about this work. And
Yeah.
so personally, I grew up in a small community of about 225 people in the woods on the outskirts of the San Francisco Bay Area. And there were folks that had lived there for decades, and there were feuds that had gone on
Mm.
for decades as well. And as a kid, one of the things that really stuck out to me was the power of coming together, of having shared purpose.
Mhm.
This would happen when we would pave. We were an unincorporated part of the county, and we'd maintain all the roads together. And as a 10-year-old, I would keep my funky shoes every year and be out there with an asphalt rake, raking that asphalt. And then I would ride my bike and I would hang out on the road, and it was a social space, and I had that connection to it. And you know, those were planned moments, but the moments where I really saw everyone's best selves come out was when there were disruptions.
Mm.
When there was a culvert got jammed and all of a sudden the road flooded, or a bridge got washed out, or even worse, when a neighbor's house caught on fire, and everybody put down whatever gripes they might have with each other, and they showed up in those moments for those that needed it and for each other, because that was the only way to be able to work through whatever disruption, whatever disaster that we were facing as a community. And so I've been very interested in this for a while, and especially, as we've seen more and more of these disasters happen, we have to figure out how we're going to work together in these
Mm.
moments. There's so much secondary harm that occurs because of the unknown, because people are afraid of how their neighbor is going to react. Someone
Mhm.
comes to your door, asking for help, asking to use the phone, and they're turned away, or even worse, sometimes they're
Mhm.
shot, in
Yeah.
the United
Yeah.
States, right? And so we need to figure out, for the good of our communities, for the good of ourselves, we have to figure out how to work with each other. And
Mhm.
so in 2017, we had the most disastrous year on record in the United States. That was the year that Hurricane Maria happened. We had
Right.
the most disaster-caused deaths in the U.S. that year. There
Mhm.
was 16, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. And that caused us to think deeper about how a lot of these projects that we had been promoting at Shareable, one, what their role was, but two, how they would be impacted by these peak moments. And so we started this exploration. And we didn't do it alone, as we do almost nothing alone at Shareable. Everything is very much
Right.
based on partnerships by design. And
Mhm.
so we worked with Transition US and the Post Carbon Institute and New Stories to put together a project. And
Mhm.
we ended up splitting into two groups basically to work together. And New Stories and Transition US went off and started doing some kind of community resilience-based pilots. And Shareable and Post Carbon Institute, we worked together to be able to tell the story. And so the first year we looked at Hurricane Maria, we looked at Hurricane Sandy in New York City, and the Tubbs Fire in Northern California, and specifically looked at how the most impacted communities
Mhm.
came together to support each other through those disruptions, and how we didn't we specifically went back and looked at these disasters 1, 2, 5, 7 years after the fact, to
Right.
see how those communities were permanently transformed by those moments, and sometimes in very small ways, and sometimes very significant ways. And up to this point, we've produced about, I think, 13 audio documentaries,
Uh-huh.
looking at things like the triple disaster in Japan,
Mhm.
the 2017 Puebla earthquake in Mexico City, but then also looking at things like the impact of the Dobbs decision on the Southeast, investigating reproductive justice and abortion rights
Right.
and how those communities are impacted. Looking at a fire at the Grenfell Tower fire in
Yes.
London, and the looking at these kind of underlying disasters, like social disasters that we're facing that maybe we don't think of in the same way as these peak
That's
environmental.
very interesting. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I have one sort of key question for you that bubbles up around this is when you looked at the transformation of communities after disaster, was there any kind of key characteristic that seemed to lead to those communities that really got transformed towards more solidarity and those where trauma just kept reinforcing itself? And was there something that you noticed where you could, if not predict, at least have a guess that it might move into a more solidarity-based direction?
I will say it was existing relationships. It was the relationships that people had before those disasters occurred,
I see.
and not necessarily that the relationships that everybody had together, but that there was already subsects of communities that had formed, that had gone through, in Puerto Rico, where we documented with we have a film about Puerto Rico during and after Hurricane Maria, and
Right.
the organizers that we track in that documentary are setting up all these kind of community centers throughout Puerto Rico, and it starts with one. But the group that first got it going, they had already been organizing against austerity measures, against cutbacks at the university, and so when this disaster happened, it was a lot easier for them to activate together, uh,
Yes.
a lot easier for that work to then replicate across the island. And
Mhm.
then those relationships that maybe were loose to begin with were strengthened through that process, and then they stayed together. And sometimes the physical infrastructure didn't stay, but the social infrastructure absolutely did.
Very important. Yeah, no, that is so interesting. And the obviously the lesson we get from that, the time to build a community is now,
Is right.
before something actually happens around that. And of course, that's as Neil mentioned earlier on, is what I think you're doing. I noticed that I think you became the ED in 2022, and it seems like that was the year that Shareable made this kind of shift towards really empowering cooperative solutions in local communities. So I'm guessing that you might have had something to do with really kind of refocusing on that shift. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about that and why you see that step and how that's been folding out in things like Solidarity Works and
Mhm.
Mutual Aid 101 and
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think so. Definitely cannot take credit myself for the pivot. Unto myself. It was a shared decision making. That actually Neil came to myself and a couple others on staff and the board and said, it was during 2021. Coming a year and a half into the pandemic, and throughout that time, it became really clear that as we, needed to do this larger societal global deep transformation, this reimagination, we had to do that within as well. Our
Mm,
organization, like what we had started out to do, we're fortunate to be successful on a number of fronts. You mentioned like the launching sharing cities work around the world, and over 100 cities had municipalized sharing cities programs, right? The city had gotten behind. Platform co-ops had taken off and grown its own wings. And same with our publishing. A lot of the stories that we had been publishing that we basically created the beat on publishing about sharing had been picked up by larger publications like The Guardian and HuffPost and The Atlantic. And
mhm.
so it was time for us to think about, what was next? Where do we need to go? And so we look back at the previous, at that point in time, about 13 years of our work. And
Mhm.
I had been working with Neil and staff at Shareable for I think over 7 years at that point in time.
Wow.
And so we'd gone through a lot of this stuff together, and it became clear that we really needed to focus our work on, more tangible actions,
Mhm.
on, to be working directly with communities, but bringing large sets of communities together, playing our role as a convener and leaning into our organizational history and experience, but also our global reach and the communities that we've been interacting, building relationships with
Mhm.
over the last, decade, over a decade at that point. And so that set off this multi-level reimagination of the organization. So
Mm.
it wasn't just developing a new program, but with Neal's shift from being the executive director and being on staff to being the president of the board,
Right.
we also brought in a whole new staff and did it over the course of the last 3 years. We made the decision to shift our internal governance structure to become to a worker self-directed nonprofit. And we'd always been very democratic in our organizing, but it was time to actually move from intention down to the tangible.
Right.
And it was that with same with our publishing and our work. And so we started looking back at a lot of the, you mentioned we've published over 300 how-to guides,
Yeah.
over the last 15 years and looked at some of them that we felt were the most relevant today
Mhm.
and started, going back to those communities and saying, hey, let's build something together. Let's work
Mhm.
on something together. And we started with emergency battery networks in partnership with the People Powered Solar Cooperative out of Oakland, California,
Oh
and did
yeah.
a, a
Crystal
work
Wang,
with them.
a
Exactly.
friend
Yep.
of
With
mine
Crystal.
who's
Yep.
organized that. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yep. And so we started our first new kind of collab with them. Last year, we worked with, there was over 200 participants in a year-long collab focused on libraries of things. There's
Yes.
over
Such a great.
2,000 libraries of things around the world,
Mhm.
over 100 tool libraries. Berkeley, California has
Mhm.
the longest running tool library. It's been running since 1978. This is proven infrastructure for sharing, very tangible. We're now
Mhm.
working, we have got a pilot and building libraries of things into affordable housing development in Houston, Texas. We've got another pilot at the University of North Florida, building them into universities, and we're working on spreading both of those models. And so we have these kind of multiple points of intervention. But as
Yeah.
we looked into this coming year, coming out of the election, we knew that there was going to be a lot of pain. Our communities, there was going to be a lot of suffering that was going to be thrusted upon our communities with the new administration.
Yeah.
And it is, very much in the United States we're feeling it, but this is a global shift that's happening towards authoritarianism um, and othering, deep, deep othering. And and so that led us to, very quickly pull together what we're running now, which is Mutual Aid 101 for all of these folks that are,
Yeah.
that are feeling this pull to step up and to collaborate, work with their communities in a meaningful way. And we were just blown away by the interest and the desire. Our first session we had Dean Spade, who's a very notable
Right.
mutual aid organizer, and we had over 2,300 people register for the first
It's
session of the
amazing.
collab, right?
Wow.
And we're maintaining the majority of that group as we're now moving through. We just had the first two sessions. The third one is happening tomorrow night and is focused on kind of the legal, financial, and security aspects of mutual aid. We've got Sustainable Economies Law Center, we've got the UC Berkeley Cybersecurity Clinic, and Fight for the Future that are all coming in to support us on this next session tomorrow night.
Fantastic. That is just so exciting. And perhaps we can put a link to sign up to the Mutual Aid 101 in the chat so people can sign up for that tomorrow if they want. And there's already been people here on the DTN who are loving it and sharing about it actually in the feed who just think and so exciting. And so in a moment, we're going to turn to go connect up with each other in breakout rooms. But before we I just want to ask one more question to you about what's your sort of sense then of where Shareable is going from here? We've been following your arc then all the way from the founding with Neal to this shift towards mutual aid and actual action. What do you see in the years ahead for Shareable?
Yeah, I think it's kind of we're going to go deeper on some of this infrastructure we've been building the last couple of years, with libraries of things for sure.
Mhm.
Just we need these physical pieces of infrastructure for sharing. It's very prefigurative.
Uh-huh.
Libraries of things are not going to solve our global waste problem, but when we solve our global waste problem, libraries of things are going to be involved. And so we
Yes.
need to build them today. So building out that tangible social infrastructure is important, and then also those social networks. So it's
Yeah.
a mix of the two. And then another part of it is spreading it, right? Is how do we get beyond our bubbles? How do we get beyond our own channels? And so we've been spending the last year and a half or so reviewing those now almost 350 how-to guides,
Hmm.
and we've chosen our top 50, and we're currently building out a widget that anybody is going to be able to host those top 50 how-to guides on their website, and we're just going to be putting that
That
out
would
for
be
free to be able to
great.
spread that
Yeah.
around. And as we produce a new one, it will automatically push out to everybody that has that on there. As we,
Yeah.
launch a new collab, it'll push within a very tasteful, non-salesy way for people to be able to access this content and to be able to come and play with us.
Yeah, God, I so appreciate that. And I tell you, this has been one of the most inspiring, uplifting experiences I've had over the last few weeks as we've been watching this destruction taking place. And that now it's our chance to connect with each other. And then after that, everyone will have the chance to ask their own questions with the people from Shareable. But I'd like to. I'm just going to put in the chat this suggestion for a question for you to explore. We're going to be going to breakout rooms of 4 people for probably about 10 minutes, just to make sure we have time for a good general Q&A after that. So what ideas, so all these great ideas have been talked about. What ideas from Shareable could you bring to your own community to help practice solidarity and care? Because that's really where it all counts. So I'm looking forward to these breakout rooms, and then we'll reconnect 10 or so minutes from now.
Hey, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, I think we're all back here in the room. I'm so grateful for that opportunity in the breakout rooms. And now let's get Hajar and Neal and Tom spotlighted with me. And now is an opportunity for anyone to, if you can raise your Zoom hand and kind of join the connection here and kind of share any questions or reflections you have. And also, um, if you want to share something, but you'd rather not be too public about it, feel free to put any question in the chat, and I'll give you an opportunity to, yeah, we can raise that there. And really, one of the things I'd also like to invite you to do, if you if you wanted to share with us in this group, is coming out of the breakout rooms that the where we were discussing these questions. Um, is there anything in particular that you were having an insight about that came out of the group that you wanted to share? But uh, to begin with, I wanted to there was a question from Marjorie Shalita, who I can give voice to right here. Said, how does a shareable initiative happen under authoritarian rule? Is there any research to suggest that the basic principles and universal laws can be supported within the harsh realities or conditions of authoritarian rule, which is obviously extremely relevant to the kind of realities we're facing today? So thank you for asking that, Marjorie. And let me turn to the three of you to just get your thoughts on that.
I can say that yes, it can, and it also can be very dangerous.
Mm,
I think true sharing can be a very subversive act, and an example of this is actually in coming out of Turkey. So Istanbul back, this is now over a decade ago, Istanbul had a time bank with 40,000 members, the biggest time bank in the world. We talk about, whether or not these sharing economies can really scale, um, and this is an example of it having scaled. And there was, when Erdogan took power, there was a number of political protests, and one of the leaders of the time bank, of the lead organizers of the time bank, was brought in to be questioned. And when they were questioned, they were specifically asked about the time bank and about Charles Eisenstein and the gift economy, and they were held for questioning for over 24 hours. And after they were temporarily released, and there was somebody within there was a friend of a friend that basically got word to this organizer that they were going to be put in prison if they didn't get out of town that night, and they had to escape under the cover of darkness. And they are still now over a decade later living in exile, and are not going to be able to go back there. So the danger is real. The danger is real. It's not just perceived.
Hmm.
With that said, there is a long, long, deep history of sharing communities in the face of these types of authoritarian governments,
Hmm.
of marginalized populations that are sharing in the background, that are doing it with informal systems that are commoning, despite the constraints. And so it absolutely can happen, but there isn't depending on how political you are. I mean, that's one of the dangers with, you know, um, politicization of a lot of mutual aid work, is that one puts a target on themselves, and which is why we're focusing a session and working with the UC Berkeley Cybersecurity Clinic to be able to
Yeah.
support mutual aid organizers in these times.
Wow, yeah, that is really, really important. It was occurring to me as you were talking, Tom, is I wonder if there's a shareable initiative waiting to be explored, like in terms of actually like almost like a how-to or resource bank for how to actually work within authoritarian regimes of one kind or another in that way, in that community building way, because I think a lot of us may be needing that kind of real skill in the years to come. Thank you for that. Really crucial question. And Larry, see your hand raised. You want to join? Um, uh, Great to see you here, Larry. And
Good to
thanks for all that
see
you do.
good to see you too, Jeremy. And I think back to conversations that we've had in the past, and I'm beginning to fall more in line with your thoughts about capitalism. Uh, But I do want to say that I'm part of a larger network, really a global network, Design School for Regenerating Earth, and also specifically in my area, Regenerate Cascadia. And
Hmm.
as part of that work, a group of us are in the process of, although there seems to be some issues right now with the state parks that needs to be overcome. We're in the process of creating a bioregional regenerative learning and media center at Fort Worden in Port Townsend, Washington. And as we put this together, I am curious about the ways that we could participate and coordinate with your organization, with Shareable, in building that learning center.
Mm, great. I wonder if any of you have any thoughts for Larry, and I'm sure others who are working on bioregional work here in the DTN around that. Oh, by the way, you're all, Neal, Hajar, and Tom, you're all muted. So you might want to just get yourself off mute. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, we love collaborating on sharing based, community infrastructure like that. So please follow up. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Cool. That's great. And just to bring another, Peter, we'll turn to you in a moment, but also wanted to bring in some of these other questions from the chat that were there. And Rob Thistleton was asking also, I think, a really important question. How do we unite the different communities slash platforms, individuals? We would talk about the need for solidarity, but the system keeps us divided. And this whole thing about polarization and actually reaching out to those who have been been sort of categorized as the other or whatever? Like, are there skills or approaches that you've seen really work in solidarity around that? Such an important theme. Who wants to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, just add something. Yeah, I think we really need to work to rebuild our civic infrastructure and civic culture, um, and not rely on technology to do it. To get out and meet each other in the flesh, and organize our communities, knock on doors, and talk to people. It's kind of just a basic idea, but I think that kind of lays a foundation for many other positive things that can come, and also is the foundation for democracy and also fighting authoritarianism.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Neal. And let's turn to you, Peter. You want to?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I've lived many years, maybe 40 years, living in community. I live in a community now. It's a small co-housing group. I grew up in a small town on the southeast coast of England. Um, and when you're in a small community, you know everybody. You bump into everybody. It's so easy to get things together. If you've got somebody, you want to cry on somebody's shoulder, you're going to find somebody. If you want to borrow a pair of pants or whatever, it's so easy to organize. Now I find myself within my co-housing group, it's very easy. We just knock it, we don't even knock on each other's doors. We walk straight into the houses. But I want to organize something in the larger town here of 140,000. It's an effort getting people together. They and I mean, yeah, it's and you have to make these plans, and it's all pulling it all together. As Charles Eisenstein said, we live in an age of separation. And we all live in our own little boxes, separated, and we've got cars that travel between the boxes, etc.
Yeah.
Coming together is not so easy. It's quite a challenge.
Right.
But
Exactly. And so I'm curious, Peter, do you have a question around that for the Shareable folks? Or?
Yeah, I mean that's for me is this challenge we come to, how to get people together and be committed to that. It's all about forming friendships as well.
Yes.
And yeah, if the
Yeah.
guests talk about that, it'll be really.
Oh, exactly. I wonder, Hajar, if there's anything you'd like to add on that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter, for bringing that up. I think what you're pointing to and elevating here is this really central idea that the only scale in which we truly have agency is in the scale of the neighborhood, in the scale of our communities. We talk a lot about systems transformation and large scale impact. But in this, VUCA context, characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the scale of the neighborhood of, the people who surround us is really the scale, the only one where we can have maximum impact during this time. And also to the comment earlier about the fact that the system is seeking to keep us divided, I think we can also reframe that and start to see ourselves as the system and become the systems that we wish to see in the world. Because otherwise, we're just giving our agency to larger forces, and that agency needs to be reclaimed in this time.
Love that. Thank you, Hajar. That's such a great way to approach that. And I noticed it's funny, we normally have such a large number of women relative to men raising their hands and speaking. And today, for some reason, we've got a bit of gender imbalance. I wonder if we could also bring in Kristen Coulson into the spotlight, and maybe don't like to get over focused on gender kind of issues here, but just for everyone's sake to get a little bit more balance. Can we turn to you, uh, Christian first, and then to Moji, and then David?
Sure. I think my question aligns with some gender issues.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just really concerned as I think about sharing economies and who has time. I study occupational health, and what I'm seeing is people have 2 or 3 jobs now, and those who are really straining and need the most support are the ones that seem to have the least amount of time and the smallest cushions in their worlds. I was wondering if you could talk about that and comment on that a little. Thank you.
Great point. Thank you, Chris. Neal, Hajar, or Tom, you want to share anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that that's a great observation. Something, I've kind of struggled with, that those that need to share the most have the uh, least opportunity to do so. That the burdens on them and the barriers are just too great. Um, yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer, to be honest. I think that there does need to be perhaps more solidarity, class solidarity, and I feel like the politics that we face drive a wedge between the middle class and the working class and poor, and that is hugely disempowering. It's a more macro view of things, but I think that we need more solidarity across class as a kind of start. I think about this interview of Saul Alinsky in 1973, where he said that he said that he had made a mistake in organizing only poor communities, and that what he wanted to do was organize middle class communities because along with poor communities, because their interests are very similar, and the middle class is where the power is. So this would be a big change in how we've gone about making things happen in the United States and elsewhere, is to think in these terms.
I really like that. Wow, thanks. That's a different way of thinking about that whole approach. Thank you for that. And I'm seeing we're beginning to get a little bit close to the end of our 75-minute session. Maybe what I can do is ask Moji and Mimu and David if all three of you can just say the questions you'd like to bring, and so we can just kind of hold them all in one, and then turn to Hajar, Neal, and Tom to close for us. So maybe beginning with you, Moji.
Hi, I just wanted very quickly to say to Sister Christine, I call people brother and sister because I'm a Sufi monk. So as we have more people joining the movement of movements, then we don't have so much pressure on any particular individual actor, civil society actor. And Neal talking about organizing the middle class. That's what I have been focusing on, chambers of compassion. And also, the other thing I wanted to share is the political repression. I am from Iran. I have a in absentia execution order for the crime of, quote unquote, crime of warring against God by the regime in Iran. I am working with people inside Iran. I've organized a group with their help called Peace Seeking Iranian Veterans. So to struggle nonviolently, right now we have in the US a regime. So I feel, hey, I am at home. I am, the US is like Iran. has a regime, has a dictator. So I sent the links to what part of what I'm talking about, but it is critically important that we the good people, so to speak. I don't want to otherize the other ones, but
Yeah.
It's critical at this point in time in Mother Earth's history that
Yeah.
we, the good people, work together systemically.
Thank you, Moji. I
Sorry,
really
Adrian.
appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for your courage and for continuing to put forward these values that are the light that are there for all of us. Thank you. And just looking at time, can we turn to you, Mimu, and then David, just to if you could just keep the comments to a minute or so so we can get them and then close with the shareable folks. So
Yes.
Mimu?
Yes, thank you for your work all. I am not familiar with Shareable, so I would like to ask this question. So my focus is healing people from inside. I think the society is broken, humanity is broken. We all need to find self-love, self-trust, self-acceptance, and then spread the lead society with love and hope and gratitude. So I'm wondering if you have suggestions, recommendations where I can find that kind of work in your platform. If you have any guidance, I would appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Mima. And then let's go to you, David, and then
Yeah, no, so I'll be brief. So you asked for insights coming from the breakout, and one thing that came to me is that we're talking about community, which is absolutely essential, but we're limiting it to humans, which I think is short-sighted, because really all my relations, this indigenous worldview, which is incredible philosophy and pedagogy and ontology and epistemology and every kind of ology you want, is really that I personally am related not only to my sisters and brothers in this screen, but to the worms and to the eagles and to the fish and to the bacteria and everything. And I think that worldview is really at the essence of modernity that is dying.
Yeah.
That Buddhista Andreotti really points out so beautifully. And if we're going to hospice its death, which means the death of our worldview, we need to take that into consideration. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on that level.
Thank you, David, for bringing that in. And yeah, and so as we are getting to closing time here, let me maybe to ask each of you if you just wanted to respond to what Mimo and David asked, and also just anything you'd like to kind of close with in terms of final thoughts. Whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to respond to what David just shared, and thank you so much, David, for this really key idea that our very notion of kinship has to be expanded to include also our more than human kin, to include the rivers and the forests and all the species that make up this beautiful earth that are other beautiful expressions of life, just like we are. And I think what these times really call for is to shift our allegiances and our loyalties and to prioritize our allegiance to life itself over all our other allegiances. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks. And Neal and Tom, you want to also respond?
I'll let Tom finish, and I'll just share a couple comments.
Yeah.
Just I love this thought about, all life being in relation. One of the things I've been doing is with a friend of mine, Lewis Fox, who was also instrumental in starting Shareable. That's another story. But he started this thing called the Bioregional Explorers Club. And so we're learning about the place where we live. We went baynut harvesting last weekend. And so I'm really interested in like how what does a bioregional solidarity economy look like, for instance? And then I just wanted to add something additionally about Saul Alinsky. In that interview in 1973 in Playboy magazine, He also said this. He said, if the left doesn't organize the middle class, the right will do it and will have an authoritarian regime. So he called it 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago. And so this kind of cross-class, organizing, it just needs to happen.
Yeah.
Along with many other things.
Exactly. No, thank you. It's so right. Yeah. So correct. And so, yeah, let me just turn to you, Tom, to close us off, and then I'll say a few words.
Yeah, and I put, my email has been in the chat, and I message Mimu you directly. But if others are looking for resources and not able to find them easily on our website, which we actually have a new website that we're putting together right now that's gonna be launching later this summer, which very excited about. But if you have any issue trying to find things on our site, please go ahead and send me an email, tom@shareable.net, and I'm happy to help orient folks to what we have. And, I think to just build upon what's said, at the end is, in order to truly have solidarity with each other, we have to find common ground where common ground can be found. And that is the only way that we're going to be able to get through the myriad challenges that are to come. Both social or not just both, but social, political, environmental, all of the shifts that we're experiencing that are going to be bigger shifts than we have ever experienced.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to do it is finding common ground in those peak moments and then in the moments in between.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Tom. Thanks for summarizing that. And just was coming back to me what you were saying before about how it's in those moments of catastrophe and crisis that those possibilities open up. And clearly that's what we seem to be moving into right now. And really today's session it's really come into my heart, this sense I'm feeling the energy and the work that you're putting out there into the world. And I understand why thousands of people have been signing up to your Mutual Aid 101. You're offering the very thing we need. I so appreciate it. And I know everyone on the DTN are right there with you. And the more that your work gets shared here on the DTN, I think the better it is for all of us. And want to thank you all so much. And just as a reminder to everyone, I just put in the chat is the fact that we do have always on Thursday, just a couple of days from now, a follow-on meeting, like a circle of practice where we just kind of go deeper into whatever arose from the session today, in a more of a deep listening kind of mode. So do sign up for that. Great opportunity to stay connected in this way and connected in an even deeper place. So appreciate you all. And I just look forward to interweaving with you. To your point, Hajar, about interbeing, let us live that interbeing and interweaving with each other in these times. Get power and energy from each other's work in these darkening times. You're the light showing the way forward. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.